So I want to take you back to the year, well, roughly 430 BC.
Okay.
There's this incredibly wealthy philosopher, a politician too,
Hmm.
and he is walking the steep, like ash-covered slopes of Mount Etna in Sicily.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, an active volcano. And he walks right up to the edge, looks down into the boiling magma, and he just throws himself in.
Man.
But the crazy thing is, he didn't do it out of despair or, hopelessness. He did it because he actually believed that by vanishing without a single trace into this fire, he would finally prove to all his followers that he was, in fact, an immortal god.
Yeah, it is. It's one of the most striking and honestly tragic deaths in all of the ancient world.
Yeah.
And, the man's name was Empedocles. And while that whole story might sound like, I don't know, the climax of a Greek myth or something, he was a very real historical figure.
Right, a real guy.
Yeah, a real guy who represents the ancient world's most ambitious attempt to solve this problem that, well, every single human being still wrestles with today, which is, we observe a universe that is so incredibly ordered and beautiful, but it's also filled with this devastating chaos and suffering.
Right.
And we are all just trying to figure out the underlying mechanics of it all.
Exactly. And, we are taking a deep dive into Empedocles today, not just to dissect some ancient history, but because his worldview provides this incredibly sharp contrast to the biblical worldview.
It really does.
When you look at his attempt to explain the universe through just, pure material forces and these endless repeating cycles, it forces you to look at the claims of, say, the Apostle Paul or the opening pages of Genesis with entirely fresh eyes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the friction between a universe governed by blind physics and a universe governed by a sovereign covenant-keeping creator, that friction is absolute.
Yeah, and that friction is exactly where the deepest theological insights often live,
Yeah.
Empedocles was essentially trying to map out a grand unified theory of everything. He wanted to explain physics, biology, and even the salvation of the human soul all in one massive system.
Just a small project.
Right, yeah, no big deal. And because he was brilliant, he actually got a few things remarkably close to the truth.
Wow, really?
Yeah, but the tragedy is because he lacked divine revelation, his overarching system ended up trapping humanity in this cold, exhausting, essentially mechanical nightmare.
Oh, man. Well, let's ground this a bit in the historical reality first.
Sure.
So we are in the 5th century BC in a city called Acragas, which is on the southern coast of Sicily.
Okay.
It's this bustling, incredibly wealthy Greek colony. And Empedocles is born into the aristocracy, but he actually uses his influence to champion a new, egalitarian democracy.
Which is pretty rare for that time.
Super rare.
Ah.
There are actual historical records of him dismantling oligarchies and even refusing the title of king when they offered it to him.
Which is just a fascinating paradox in his character, right? Because he demands political equality for regular citizens, yet he literally walks the streets in purple robes,
Right.
wearing a golden laurel wreath, claiming to be this divine prophet who can, control the winds and cure the sick.
That's so wild.
He is a physician, a political reformer, and a mystic, all rolled into one guy.
Yeah.
And he leaves behind these two major epic poems that outline his whole philosophy. One is called On Nature, which deals with cosmology and the physical world, and the other is called Purifications, which deals with ethics and the human soul.
Okay, so to understand why he wrote On Nature, I think we have to understand the massive philosophical crisis of his day.
Yes.
He was responding to an older philosopher named Parmenides, who had proposed something that sounds utterly insane to modern ears.
Right.
Parmenides basically argued that reality was completely frozen.
Like an illusion.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. He used this strict deductive logic to say that if something currently exists, it cannot become something else because that would require it to pass through, nothingness. And nothingness, by definition, doesn't exist. So therefore, all change, all motion, and all passing of time is just a massive optical illusion.
It sounds totally absurd when you say it out loud today.
Oh, completely.
But in the ancient Greek world, Parmenides' logic was considered a steel trap.
Right.
I mean, it created a massive intellectual crisis. Because Empedocles is looking at the world around him. He sees wood burning into ash.
Right, he sees the change.
He sees seasons changing, people aging. He knows change is real. But he also deeply respects that logical rule that you can't create matter out of nothing, and you can't just reduce matter to nothing.
So he engineers this remarkably clever compromise.
Yeah.
He proposes that the universe is actually made up of 4 eternal, unchanging roots, which is what we now call the classical elements.
Fire, water, earth, air.
Exactly. Fire, water, earth, and air. And he argues that Parmenides was half right. These 4 foundational elements never actually change their core nature, but they are constantly being mixed together and separated in different proportions to create the illusion of birth and death.
Which is essentially the birth of chemical theory.
It really is.
Yeah, Empedocles is recognizing that macroscopic complexity, the big stuff, is built out of microscopic simplicity.
Right.
And to explain this to the ancient mind, he develops what historians call the painter simile.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah, he points to a craftsman mixing pigments. So a painter only has a few basic colors on his palette, right? Red, yellow, black, and white.
Sure.
The pigments themselves don't change their nature, but by mixing them in highly specific proportional ratios, the painter can render an endless variety of forms.
Right, like a tree or a face.
Exactly. A human face, a stormy sea. Empedocles argues that the universe is just this cosmic painter, mixing the 4 elements to create all biological life.
And he even went so far as to guess the specific chemical ratios, which is mind-blowing.
It is.
He hypothesized that human bone was composed of exactly 2 parts earth, 2 parts water, and 4 parts fire, which, without a microscope or any understanding of atomic weights, is a staggering conceptual leap.
Oh, absolutely.
And he applies this same observational logic to human anatomy with his lantern simile, suggesting that the eye functions like a lantern in a storm.
Oh, right.
So the fire of our internal vision shines out through these microscopic pores in the eye, protected from the surrounding water, allowing us to see.
It just shows a mind desperately trying to deduce the invisible mechanics of the world from the visible things he can actually observe.
Right.
But this is precisely where his system hits a massive theological and physical roadblock.
Yeah, because if the universe just consists of dirt, water, wind, and fire sitting in a void, those elements are entirely inert.
Right, they don't do anything on their own.
Earth and water don't spontaneously decide to organize themselves into a complex human femur.
Exactly.
There has to be a motor.
Yeah.
Like there has to be a catalyst that actually causes the mixing and the separating.
And Empedocles recognized that problem, so he introduced 2 cosmic forces to act upon the elements. He called them love and strife.
Oh.
But we have to divorce those words from our modern emotional understanding of them.
Right, it's not a romance.
Not at all. In his physics, love is not affection. It is a blind, mechanical force of gravitational attraction.
Oh.
It just pulls dissimilar elements together.
Okay.
And strife is the exact opposite. It is a force of separation, like a kind of cosmic entropy that tears elements apart.
Wait, but if love is just a contracting force, pulling all the fire, water, earth, and air together, if love wins completely, wouldn't it just result in a completely dead, compressed sphere of matter?
Precisely. That is exactly it. In his model, pure love means the destruction of all individual life.
Oh, wow.
It just compresses everything into this massive, homogeneous blob. Biological life, with all its distinct forms and functions, can only exist in the middle ground, when strife enters the sphere and starts tearing the elements apart, creating individual mixtures.
So life itself is just the collateral damage of a cosmic war.
Pretty much.
And worse, it's an endless loop. Like, love pulls everything into a sphere, strife tears it all apart into utter chaos, and then love slowly starts pulling it back together again.
Right.
So the universe is basically just a washing machine on an infinite spin cycle.
Yes.
There is no destination. There is no moral arc to history. We are just randomized dirt, temporarily organized by blind thermodynamics, just waiting to be shredded apart again.
And when you lay that pagan cosmology side by side with the opening declarations of Scripture, the contrast is absolute.
It's night and day.
The biblical worldview completely upends every single premise of Empedocles' system.
Let's unpack that.
Let's start with the origin of matter itself. Empedocles assumes that his 4 elements are eternal. They have always existed. Matter is uncreated.
Which actually makes matter a rival to God.
Yes.
If matter is eternal, it doesn't owe its existence to a creator. It just is.
Right.
But Genesis 1.1 shatters that immediately. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah.
The Hebrew word used there is bara.
And bara is a verb that in the Old Testament is exclusively used with God as the subject.
Oh, that's fascinating.
It's never used for humans making things. It describes bringing a completely new reality into existence by sovereign decree. God isn't a cosmic painter simply mixing pre-existing eternal pigments.
Right. He's not just rearranging the furniture.
Exactly. He speaks matter into existence ex nihilo, out of nothing. Matter is not self-existent. It is a dependent creation.
Right.
And that distinction changes literally everything.
How so?
Well, if matter is created, it is subordinate to the creator. It has a designated purpose.
Yeah, and this dramatically changes the governing dynamic of the universe.
I hope entirely.
In the Greek model, the universe is governed by blind, impersonal forces of attraction and repulsion. But the Old Testament reveals a universe sustained by a deeply personal, holy God whose defining characteristic toward his creation is steadfast, covenant faithfulness.
Yes.
And the biblical term for this is hesed.
Ah, hesed. It is one of the most vital theological concepts in all of Scripture.
It really is.
It translates to loyal love, covenant-keeping devotion, or merciful faithfulness. It is a legally binding yet profoundly relational commitment.
I love that.
The universe is not held together by mindless gravity and entropy. It is actively sustained by the hesed of a creator who has made promises to his creation and who actually possesses the character to keep those promises.
You see this so beautifully in Psalm 104.
Yes, great text.
His psalmist looks at the exact same physical elements that Empedocles observed. You know, the wind, the fire, the water, and the earth.
Right.
But the psalmist doesn't view them as eternal roots or independent gods. He views them as obedient servants.
Oh, yeah.
The text says that God makes the winds his messengers and flames of fire his servants. When God sends forth his spirit, biological life is created. When he hides his face, they return to dust. The elements are completely responsive to a person, not a mechanism.
And because they're responsive to a person, history is not a meaningless repeating loop.
Right, we're not stuck in the washing machine.
No. And this is the profound pastoral insight of Ecclesiastes 3. King Solomon writes that God has, quote, put eternity into man's heart. We observe the cycles of nature, the rising and setting of the sun, the changing of the seasons, but we possess this innate God-given revulsion to the idea that our lives are just a meaningless cyclical treadmill.
We really do.
We crave a linear narrative. We crave an overarching purpose that actually culminates in justice and ultimate restoration.
It makes complete sense why the early church fathers vigorously debated this specific philosophy.
Oh, they were all over it.
They recognize that the mechanics of how you view the universe directly dictate your theology. Like, we have records of Hippolytus, this prominent 3rd century theologian, specifically calling out the Gnostics for plagiarizing Empedocles.
Right, the early heretics.
Yeah. The Gnostics tried to argue that the physical world was inherently evil and created by this lesser chaotic God, while the spiritual realm was governed by a pure, loving God.
And Hippolytus rightly pointed out that the Gnostics were just taking Empedocles' pagan concepts of strife and love, dressing them up in Christian terminology, and basically selling it as divine revelation.
Wow, just repackaging it.
Exactly. Meanwhile, another early father, Clement of Alexandria, approached Empedocles with a bit more nuance, which is interesting.
Really?
Yeah, he actually praised the Greek philosopher for recognizing that the universe was ordered, that complexity required a unifying principle, and that mere chance wasn't enough to explain biological life.
But Clement recognized the fatal flaw, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Empedocles could observe the intricate order of the human eye or the structure of a bone. But his polytheistic worldview forced him to attribute all that brilliance to mindless physical forces.
Right.
He had enough common grace to see the design, but he was completely blind to the designer.
And that blindness is most tragic when you look at Empedocles' theory of salvation.
Yeah.
Because he didn't just write about physics, he wrote about the human soul in his poem Purifications.
Which is where the system gets incredibly dark.
Very.
Because if the universe is just elements being smashed together and torn apart, what actually happens to human consciousness?
Right.
Well, Empedocles believed that the human soul, which he called a daemon, was essentially a divine spark that got caught in the crossfire.
Like collateral damage.
Right.
Right.
He taught that because of ancient sins, primarily bloodshed and, strangely, the eating of meat, these divine spirits fell from a state of blessedness and became trapped in physical matter.
So his entire doctrine of salvation was based on reincarnation.
Yeah.
He taught that a soul is condemned to wander for 30,000 seasons, being born into various moral forms like plants, animals, human beings, just constantly tossed between the four elements.
That is terrifying.
It is. The only way to escape the cycle was through rigorous self-purification. You had to adhere to strict vegetarianism, perform these complex rituals, and slowly elevate your intellectual and moral purity over countless lifetimes, hoping that eventually, maybe you could walk free from the physical world and return to the realm of the divine.
It is the ultimate system of self-salvation, and it sounds absolutely exhausting.
Exhausting is the perfect word for it.
You are on an eternal treadmill, carrying the weight of your own cosmic defilement, trying to purify yourself across thousands of lifetimes. You are essentially trying to climb a mountain of moral perfection that is actively being torn apart by the forces of strife beneath your very feet.
It perfectly encapsulates the hopelessness of ancient paganism.
Yes, it does.
And honestly, it highlights exactly why the gospel of Jesus Christ was such an explosive, liberating force in the ancient world.
Yes.
The New Testament doesn't just tweak these ancient philosophies, it completely shatters the treadmill.
Man, let's pivot to that redemptive core, because the contrast is just breathtaking.
It really is.
Consider the concept of love. In Empedocles' world, love is a physical mechanism of attraction. It doesn't care about you, it just pulls atoms together.
Right, like gravity.
But in 1 John 4.8, the Apostle John makes this universe-altering declaration. God is love.
Yes.
And the Greek word he uses is agape.
And agape is the absolute antithesis of a blind physical force.
Oh, completely.
John defines this love not as a mechanism, but as a historical, self-giving sacrifice. He says, "In this, the love of God was made manifest among us, that God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him."
Wow.
The grammar John uses here emphasizes that this isn't just a distant historical event, it is the vivid, ongoing reality of God's very nature.
Right.
Agape bleeds, it acts intentionally. It is the Creator stepping into the brokenness of the creation to absorb the chaos and secure the salvation of his creatures.
That intentionality completely redefines how we view the physical world around us.
He does.
In Colossians chapter 1, the Apostle Paul is writing to a church that was surrounded by proto-Gnostic philosophies, people who basically believed that the material world was governed by hostile elemental spirits or blind cosmic forces.
Just like Empedocles.
Exactly. And Paul writes regarding Jesus Christ that by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible.
Yeah.
And in him all things hold together.
In him, all things hold together. That phrase is structurally magnificent.
So good.
Paul uses this framing that indicates a completed action in the past that has continuous, ongoing results right now in the present.
Right.
Paul is saying that right now, in this very millisecond, Jesus Christ is actively sustaining the molecular architecture of the universe by the word of his power.
Man. If we were to use a modern analogy, Empedocles viewed love as a sort of blind magnetic pull, indiscriminately crushing things together. But Paul is describing something closer to like the nuclear strong force.
Oh, that's good.
The precise, localized, intentional power that holds the nucleus of an atom together against the forces that actively want to blow it apart.
Yes.
Christ isn't just a watchmaker who wound the universe up and walked away. He's intimately, actively holding the atoms in your chair, the cells in your bloodstream, and the orbit of the earth together right now.
And this completely destroys the pagan concept of the body as a prison.
Right, because if he made it and holds it, it's not bad.
Exactly. If Christ created the physical world and actively sustains it, then matter is not inherently evil. Tertullian, who was a brilliant and fiery early church father, absolutely ridiculed Empedocles' doctrine of reincarnation.
Who did not hold back.
He really didn't. He wrote extensively on the soul, pointing out the philosophical absurdity that a rational human being, created in the image of God, could somehow be punished by being reincarnated into a shrub or a bean plant.
It's hilarious when you read Tertullian on this, but it's also a profound defense of human dignity.
It is.
Empedocles thought the goal of salvation was to escape the physical body. But the biblical narrative is that God declared the physical world good.
Yes.
When humanity fell, God didn't abandon the physical world. He entered it. He took on physical flesh in the incarnation.
And he redeems us not by helping us escape our bodies, but through his own bodily physical resurrection. And as Peter outlines in 2 Peter 3, our ultimate hope is not becoming floating spirits in an ethereal void. Our hope is a physical resurrection in a restored, physical, new heaven and new earth where righteousness dwells.
Which brings up the most comforting truth of all, regarding Hebrews 9.27.
Oh, I love this verse.
The writer of Hebrews states that it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment.
Yeah.
Now, to a modern secular ear, that might sound imposing or scary. But to someone trapped in the pagan worldview of Empedocles, that verse is the ultimate declaration of freedom.
Absolutely.
You die once, there is no endless treadmill of reincarnation. There are not 30,000 lifetimes of exhausting self-purification.
Because the burden of purification has been entirely removed from our shoulders and placed onto Christ.
So
The pagan system says you must purify yourself. The gospel says you are fundamentally incapable of purifying yourself, so Christ has purified you with his own blood.
yes.
It is a finished work. We don't achieve our salvation through rigorous cosmic effort. We receive it through faith in the substitute.
And this theology isn't just academic. It has profound implications for how an ordinary Christian lives tomorrow morning.
It changes everything.
When the alarm goes off, how does this view of a Christ-sustained universe hit the pavement in our daily discipleship?
Well, first, I think it should radically transform how believers interact with the natural sciences.
Oh, totally.
There is often this underlying fear in some Christian circles that if science explains the mechanics of a biological process or the chemical composition of a star, it somehow diminishes God.
Like we're explaining him away.
Right. But when we view the world through the lens of common grace, we realize that science is simply mapping the architecture of Christ's sustaining power.
Exactly. When ancient thinkers like Empedocles deduced that complex forms were made of proportional basic elements, or when modern geneticists map the human genome, they aren't disproving God.
No, not at all.
They're just discovering the brushstrokes of the Creator. Science tells us how the elements mix. Scripture tells us who is mixing them and why.
That's a great way to put it.
The deeper the scientific discovery, the more we should just marvel at the precision of the Word who holds it all together.
A second incredibly practical application is the rejection of fatalism.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Well, in Empedocles' cosmology, strife, which produces chaos, decay, tearing apart, and suffering, was an eternal, necessary component of the universe.
Right, it was built into the system.
It was a permanent part of the engine. But pastorally, we need to recognize that the Bible firmly rejects this. When you experience intense conflict in your marriage, when a terrifying medical diagnosis tears at your physical body, or when you see the chaos of war, you are not looking at the eternal norm of the universe.
That is a radical shift in perspective.
It is.
If strife is an internal property of matter, then the pain we experience is literally unnatural.
It is unnatural. Pain, decay, and death are intruders. They are the results of the fall.
Right.
And because they are intruders, they have an expiration date. Christ has definitively conquered them at the cross, and when he returns, he will eradicate them entirely. We do not have to resign ourselves to suffering as if it is simply the eternal way of things.
Wow.
We grieve, but we grieve with hope, knowing that chaos does not get the final word.
And that leads directly to finding profound peace in God's providence.
Yes.
If we lived in Empedocles' universe, our lives would be subject to the blind, randomized churning of an impersonal washing machine.
A nightmare.
When tragedy struck, it would just be the meaningless thermodynamics of strife. But we live in a universe governed by a covenant-keeping creator. If Christ actively holds the atoms of a cancer cell and directs the orbit of the earth, then our suffering is never random.
It is the difference between being a pawn in a randomized computer algorithm versus being a character in a meticulously authored story where the author actively loves his characters.
Oh, that's beautiful.
In an algorithm, a destructive variable is just a glitch in the code. It has no meaning. But in a story authored by a good and sovereign God, even the darkest chapters are being actively woven into a conclusion of ultimate redemption. We can rest in the middle of severe turbulence because we know the character of the pilot holding the narrative together.
Which brings us back to the stark contrast between the false god of Acragas and the true God of Scripture.
Yeah, full circle.
The ancient historians tell us that Empedocles would walk through the streets of his city dressed in royal purple, boasting to the crowds, quote, "I go about among you an mortal god, no longer mortal."
So arrogant.
And yet, he died a very mortal death. The legend of him throwing himself into the boiling lava of Mount Etna is the ultimate portrait of human pride.
It really is.
A man destroying himself just to maintain the illusion of his own divinity.
It is the tragic dead end of human hubris. He tried to ascend to godhood and was literally consumed by the very physical elements he claimed to understand and control.
But look at the exact opposite trajectory we find in Philippians chapter 2.
Right.
Jesus Christ, who is in the very form of God, who actually spoke the universe into existence, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped.
No, he didn't.
He didn't walk the streets demanding to be treated as a god to intimidate the peasants. Instead, he emptied himself.
Yeah.
He took the form of a servant. He willingly stepped down into our mortal mess, subjecting himself to the physical elements of wood and nails.
Yeah.
He didn't throw himself into a volcano to prove a lie. He allowed himself to be nailed to a cross, to defeat death forever, and to secure our physical, bodily resurrection.
Amen.
What does it mean for your life today that we worship a Savior who didn't claim divinity from a safe distance with loud boasts, but proved it by descending into our chaos to rescue us through silent, sacrificial love?
That is the beautiful truth.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Let this contrast drive you back to the beauty of the Scriptures. Keep studying the Word, keep marveling at the world He sustains, and keep resting in the finished work of Christ. We will see you next time.